good, all of you beautiful people out there? How are y'all doing today? That is fantastic. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, back to the Double Diesel Sports Podcast, the podcast where we talk everything National Football League, in season, off season. It does not matter because it is football. I am your host, Double Diesel, and welcome to this Week 12 recap, your Thanksgiving week recap of the 2023 National Football League season. Before we dive into the show, I'd like to ask, if you have not done so already, to please like, subscribe, and share the video if you've not done so already. Helps boost the channel's numbers, helps us get us out there to more viewers, into the algorithm, etc., etc. So if you have not done so already and you'd like to, that would be greatly appreciated. Also, if you'd like to, go support me on Patreon at patreon.com/Double Diesel Sports. Helps support the channel financially, helps put food in my belly, and that would be greatly appreciated if you would like to do that as well. A link to that will be in the description down below. But let's go on with the show. Thanksgiving week is officially in the books, and it's usually around this time of the year where, you know, the real season is starting to begin, where teams are really starting to make a push for the postseason, and it's starting to shape out. You're really starting to get a good sense of who the elites of the elites are, who the bottom feeders are, and who are those teams that you can legitimately see making a run to the playoffs this year. And you know, as far as the Thanksgiving slate goes, not a whole lot to talk about outside of what in my opinion was a shocking game between the Packers and the Lions, where the Lions basically got blown out. But I'm not going to talk about that too much because I do think that was just a little hiccup. I do think that it was a case of the Lions potentially playing down to their opponent a little bit. So I'm not going to dive too deep into that, and I'm ultimately not too worried about the Detroit Lions. But one game that I do want to talk about from those Thanksgiving, or basically that 2-day window of Thanksgiving games, was the first ever Black Friday game between the Miami Dolphins and the New York Jets. Now, while this was really, from a pure game standpoint, not really much of a contest, the Miami Dolphins won this game relatively handily, 34-13. And this was just, you know, nothing really to say much about the Miami Dolphins. They just sort of checked out mentally through the second half of this game. They didn't really run a lot of their typical stuff in the second half because they had such a good handle on this game, and you know, the Dolphins offense didn't really perform that great. The Jets defense did give them fits, but they've done that all year, so hey, it is what it is. But the reason why I wanted to talk about this game in particular is because of the losing team in this game. I know we've been talking about for most of this season, or for about 2 months now, about the New York Giants needing to be deleted as a franchise, or rather demoted as an NFL team, because they've just been so bad and so talentless and just not really had any sort of semblance of life to them. I think we really need to start considering which New York team to really give that honor to. Because after Friday, the New York Jets shouldn't even exist anymore, man. This has just gone so off the rails. It's become so depressing. And I wanted to say, I can't really say I told you so to Jets fans, because I did have this sense coming into the year of sort of they pumped the brakes a little bit on the New York Jets hype, because with Aaron Rodgers coming in and him bringing in all these guys, and the defense looks great, and you know, this offense is really going to be unlocked, and Garrett Wilson's going to be unlocked, and Breece Hall's coming back, and there was so much hype and legitimate Super Bowl expectations to a degree for the New York Jets, and I was one of the few people that was like, pump the brakes a little bit. They're the Jets, are going to find a way. But when I was saying that, I was anticipating a like Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson-esque fall off, where Rodgers doesn't play as well as advertised and the offense still doesn't look good or regresses. Like, that's what I was anticipating. I wasn't anticipating Rodgers to go out for most of the season on his first drive as a Jet. I wasn't anticipating them having to go back to Zach Wilson by the second drive of the season. I wasn't anticipating that. So that's why I'm hesitant to say I told you so, because this isn't how this was supposed to turn out. Like, this offense was catered for one man and one man only, and that was Aaron Rodgers. And that was it. So Zach Wilson comes in, and he plays well in spurts. You know, he had a pretty good game against the Kansas City Chiefs on Sunday Night Football back in, what was that, week 4? And then, you know, he's had a couple moments here and there, but as the season has gone on, he's regressed back to the Zach Wilson that they wanted to move off of to begin with. That's the reason they got after Aaron Rodgers to begin with, was because of how Zach Wilson has played his first couple of years and how he's played these last few weeks. So, and it's been so bad to the point where they not only benched him the last week, but they also demoted him to third string. So even if something happens, he can't even get into the game. So that's number one. Number two, and this is from a coaching and management of your team perspective. I get Zach Wilson has not played well. I get that. I get he has not moved along the way you might have hoped he would have. And I understand the decision behind benching him. But you're really telling me you couldn't find any other quarterback option to start better than Tim Boyle, who's never really had a real opportunity and has sort of bounced around as a backup and bounced around practice squads. And the only reason Tim Boyle was there was, again, because he's one of Aaron Rodgers' boys. It's the only reason he's there. And yes, he was in Green Bay for a while and knows Nathaniel Hackett's offense, but you couldn't find a better option. I mean, you just signed Trevor Siemian. At least Trevor Siemian has some starting experience. He's also not good, but at least he has some starting experience. Tim Boyle doesn't even have that. And he got the start on Friday, and it went exactly how you anticipated it to go. Can't push the ball down the field. Isn't really in that much control of the offense. Cannot make plays, is a horrible athlete, doesn't have a lick of arm strength to him. And that was evident on the last play of the first half, where they got into a position to get a Hail Mary right before the half because the Dolphins turned the ball over around midfield or so. And Tim Boyle throws this thing like 2 yards shy of the end zone. Javon Holland picks it off and has the easiest possible 99-yard pick six you will ever see. This is like, it's incredible that it's like, oh my God, a 99-yard pick six. All he had to do was outrun some linemen and juke out Tim Boyle, and he would have scored. That was it. That was all he had to do. But like, that's the most Jet thing of all time. On, what was it? Was that the 10th year anniversary or the 11th year anniversary of the butt fumble? Whereas back in 2012, like 10, 11 years ago, where Mark Sanchez had the butt fumble on Thanksgiving night, where he ran into the ass of his offensive line and Stephen Gregory picked it up and scored. And then 10, 11 years later, right at the end of the half, Javon Holland has a 99-yard pick six on a failed Hail Mary attempt. The Jets are going to jet, man. The Jets are always going to jet. But it didn't have to be this way. There's too much talent on this team for them to had to have been this way. And I'm going to say this. I have officially, and I think a lot of people have felt this way now, especially after Friday. I no longer have the faith in Robert Saleh and Joe Douglas, or really just this coaching staff and front office in general, the way I did coming into the year. Because I was like, okay, they're still good coaches. I think they're still going to keep their jobs. And even now, I still think they're going to keep their jobs. At least Saleh, potentially. Douglas, that's more so up in the air in my eyes. But it's just, man, they really, this offseason and the state of this team right now is really showed just how much they bent to the will of Aaron Rodgers. Because, signing Allen Lazard to a 4-year, $44 million contract, who, by the way, was a healthy scratch this past week. Signing Randall Cobb, even though he can't really do anything anymore at his age. Signing Tim Boyle. Hiring Nathaniel Hackett, even though he's already been exposed as a fraud without Aaron Rodgers. It's bringing in all these guys, not because they're qualified, not because they're good players or good coaches. No, because Aaron liked them. They were brought in because Aaron Rodgers liked them. And they wanted to build this team for Aaron Rodgers. And it shows this team, this offense is built for Aaron Rodgers and Aaron Rodgers alone. You place any other quarterback in that system and it's not going to work. Because no other quarterback can take Allen Lazard, who is a wide receiver 5 at best for most teams, and have him playing like a wide receiver 2 or a borderline wide receiver 1. Aaron Rodgers could. No other quarterback can. And it's bringing in Nathaniel Hackett, who, like I said, was exposed last year as the head coach of Denver and has been exposed pretty much most of this year as well as a guy that his scheme is not good. This is the same guy who, was the offensive coordinator for a Jags team back in 2018. That was one of the worst scoring offenses in football. So all these guys were elevated by Aaron Rodgers and got jobs because of Aaron Rodgers and the relationships with Aaron Rodgers. And the Jets bit, and I get it. They weren't anticipating him to go down 4 plays into the season, but it just was evident of like, man, they really just did not have a viable backup plan. Not just at quarterback, but for anything. Like, they were not anticipating, wow, what does happen when a near 40-year-old quarterback does get injured? What happens if said 40-year-old quarterback doesn't play as well as we thought he would? They didn't have a backup plan. They just thought, hey, we got Aaron Rodgers. We'll bring in some of his guys. All will be good. Super Bowl, here we come. And now here you are sitting in a spot where, fuck the Super Bowl. Playoffs are probably out of the picture. You're not making the postseason this year. I get the AFC is not as great and as dominant as we thought it would be, but it's still, and I know it's still wide open for the most part, but the state of this team, yeah, the defense is still great, but you're not making the postseason with this team. Not right now, at least. So that's from Friday. And then this morning, right as I am about to sit down to record this, news breaks that we were all anticipating, we were all kind of waiting for to see when it would happen, but it's still incredibly dumb. And that is, news broke by Rappaport this morning that Aaron Rodgers has officially been activated off of IR. The 21-day practice window is officially opened for him, and he's now set to practice with the team, and he's been cleared to practice with the New York Jets. I'm going to talk about this, and then I'm going to stop talking about the Jets for the rest of the show. Is why? Well, first of all, how? Because I'm still of the belief, because what I was hearing all year that Aaron Rodgers was working and rehabbing and to get back later in the year, like in the middle of December or so. And I thought, how is that even possible? He got a torn Achilles, or at the very least a ruptured Achilles. That's usually an injury that it takes a guy out 8 to 10 months. How is he shaving a whole 6 to 8 months off of that recovery? That doesn't... So either two things happen. Either him and or the Jets lied and it wasn't actually a full tear, or it wasn't a full rupture and they kind of exaggerated that a little bit, or he just somehow, by the miracle of God, did a speed run through the recovery process, which even then, he got injured the second week of September. We are 2 days away from December. That's what, 2 months in between? 2-3 months? You're telling me he tore his Achilles and then 3 months later is back to playing physical football? How? At 40 years old? How? So that doesn't make any sense to me. That's number one. Number two, I don't even know why he would want to come back. I get it. He wants to prove everyone wrong and say, hey, I did this. It's possible. Which we'll have to wait and see when he plays first to see how possible it actually is. But like I said, you look at the state of this team. You look at the state of this offense. They have a horrible offensive line. Their receivers outside of Garrett Wilson can't do goddamn anything. And the team is just in no man's land at 4 win. What are they? 4-8 right now? Like, this team is just stuck in complete hell right now. That Aaron Rodgers, at 40 years old, coming off of a sped up Achilles injury, is not going to really fix, at least in my eyes. I don't get why he would willingly put himself in that situation just to say, hey, I did it. The Jets, man. The Jets, they always find a way. They always find a way to sort of like reel you in and then just be like, but this is just a weird-ass team and a weird-ass organization. If I was Rodgers, if I was the Jets, I would just say, you know what, Aaron, no. We're shutting it down for the year. We're playing for next year because this year's not salvageable. We're after week 12. We got 4 wins on the year. This season's not salvageable. This offense isn't good enough. And that's the thing. Is like, I don't even think they're going to fire Hackett either. Or cut Lazard, or cut Randall Cobb unless he retires, or, get rid of the other guys he brought in because they don't want to piss off Aaron. They had Aaron set this up because it was what Aaron wanted. It was perfect for Aaron, and they don't want to fuck that up, and I understand that. But, my God, you got to get some more talent in there. At least build up the offensive line more. At least try and get him in a situation where they could keep him upright. But we'll see. He's not clear to play in games just yet. But that's a wait and see sort of thing. And we don't know when exactly that will be the case. But you damn sure will be talking about it when that does in fact happen. Now, let's move on to Sunday. Not a whole lot to talk about from Sunday. There are a few things, a couple things that happened on Sunday itself, and a thing that happened the Monday after Sunday. That was pretty big news. First off, I want to talk about, there was a really wide a range of tank bulls that happened on Sunday. You had the Panthers and the Titans. There was quite a few games where it was like, all right, there are just two teams battling out for draft position, but none of them, and I repeat, none of them were more highly anticipated, more, God, this is going to be so horrible, than the Patriots heading to MetLife Stadium to take on the New York Giants. And boy, howdy. This game was as every bit of bad as you could possibly imagine it to be. As I've established well enough on this channel that I am a die-hard New England Patriots fan. Been so as long as I've been a football fan, back in 2011. Seen a lot of highs with this team. Never experienced a low this low. And I've never been in a situation where I am happy and relieved after a loss. Because, hear me out on this. Hear me out. You don't ever want your team to lose games. Why the hell would you want them to lose? That you're just a hater at that point if you are going into every single week hoping your team loses. But, the royal but, there are certain situations that arise in a team's moment in history where they look into the mirror on the wall, saying, mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all? And then they see not one, not two, but three dazzling fair ones in the near future. One from Southern California, another from North Carolina, and another in the Mideast in Ohio. Two dazzling quarterbacks, one dazzling wide receiver. And you see that in the near future, and you're like, you know what? Sucking doesn't sound all that bad now. And that is my mindset for the rest of this season. And so yes, in a way, I am actively hoping my team loses out for the rest of the year so I can at least get a shot of getting into the top 3 to get either Caleb Williams, Drake May, or Marvin Harrison Jr., any of the three. And the one thing that was terrifying to me as far as keeping us from getting into that position was this game against the New York Giants, because the Giants, in my opinion, were worse than we were. They had less talent, which is saying a lot. They had worse quarterback play, which is saying a lot. And, they were just a team in despair, starting an undrafted rookie quarterback who is the most New York/Jersey thing you could ever see. The idea of a quarterback for the New York Giants named Tommy DeVito from Syracuse University, who's Italian and still lives with his parents, just sounds too perfect to be true, but it is. So I thought, damn it, if we're going to get a shot at one of those three guys, we're going to have to lose to the New York Giants. But the Giants were also looking to lose as well because, hey, they want to improve their future. Well, at least the Giants fan base does. The teams themselves and the coaches themselves, they don't want to lose games. I mean, it's their livelihoods. They're coaching and playing for their jobs. It doesn't make sense for them to actively lose. Though I have some theories on that based on how this game ended. But this game was horrendous. And it ended with the Giants winning this game 10-7 on a missed Chad Ryland 35-yard field goal attempt. A miss so bad that a part of me is convinced he missed it on purpose. Either to help us tank or to save us the misery of potentially watching 10 more minutes of this game. Which, I've not actively watched Patriots games, at least not sat down and watched them in their entirety. I've watched them on Red Zone. mainly because I didn't want to put myself through the misery of it. But I decided to watch this game in full, and boy, did I pick a good one to do it with. But man, I'll talk a little bit about the Giants first, because the Giants have now won 2 straight games that are not going to save their season and are just kind of screwing themselves from a draft position standpoint. So yeah, the Giants won the battle, but I think have ultimately lost the war, barring, a potential trade up in the draft. But New England, wow, it's almost laughable at how bad this team is. And it's almost fitting that Chad Ryland, a rookie kicker who Belichick drafted in the 4th round, misses a chip shot field goal to tie the game and send the game into overtime. And the guy that Belichick kicked to the curb for said rookie kicker, Nick Folk, goes over to Tennessee and continues to be a really damn good kicker for them. Another great roster decision by the great GM that is Bill Belichick. But yeah, I mean, there's really nothing else to say after that. It's just this team is a dead man walking. They're playing uninterested. Mac Jones is just, I mean, we all know he's been broken. We saw it after the horrible pick he threw at the end of the Colts game in Germany a couple weeks ago. But even then, they just don't, they don't have a viable starting quarterback on their roster. They cut Will Greer, but then yesterday they re-signed him to their practice squad. Malik Cunningham is still on their practice squad. The only 2 quarterbacks on the roster right now are Mac Jones and Bailey Zappi, and both of them are basically clones of each other, and Bailey Zappi's a worse version of Mac Jones, even though I will say the offense did move a little bit better under Bailey Zappi than it did Mac, who is just completely broken. But even then, Bailey Zappi has more physical limitations than Mac does, and he has even worse arm strength than Mac does. And he's just as prone to throwing boneheaded picks as Mac is. So, though Mac probably hasn't beat out in that category. But yeah, this team is just completely soulless, and they're just so uninterested, which you never thought you would see out of a Patriots team coached by Bill Belichick. And it's so bizarre because you look at the past few years, and yes, they haven't been that successful the past few years. They only made the playoffs once in the new decade. But even then, it's you always thought, all right, Belichick should at least keep this team competitive. They're still not going to be bad enough to get a high top 10 pick, because they're still going to try and be in the mix to it. And they're still going to be competitive, because Belichick is always going to have this team being competitive. I mean, you look at the 2020 team. From a talent perspective, I still believe that 2020 roster is worse than the current roster. And that's saying a lot, because from a talent perspective, we have more talent than that 2020 team did. And even then, that 2020 Patriots squad still finished 7-9. They still finished a game below 500 with a legitimate, on paper, bottom 3 roster. So that's why this year has been so shocking, is because how did everything go this badly? Yes, you can say injuries to key defensive players. Yes, you can say that Mac has regressed significantly. But it's a matter of, how did he regress so much? How did he become so broken? I mean, you can point out pretty obviously how he became so broken, because the team just refused to build around him. And it's just, every bit of this organization, every bit of this team was completely mismanaged, and it's starting to catch up to them. Assuming it hasn't already catched up to them. But it's just reinforced the idea in my mind of, hey, hit the reset button. Let go of Belichick. Let go of all of his guys. and bring in some fresh faces and try to rejuvenate this organization. And, maybe that's what's needed. And I know that's tough because, Belichick and the dynasty is all us Patriots fans have ever really known. But everything has an expiration date, and I think Belichick is reaching his expiration date. So that's that. But let's go from the worst game on Sunday to arguably the best game of the year. Bills, Eagles. And this was a game that did end up going into overtime, and thank goodness it did, because this was an incredible football game to watch. And it really was just two heavyweights throwing fisticuffs, going pound for pound with each other, and neither really showing signs of slowing down. And I want to talk about the Philadelphia Eagles first, because they won this game. I want to give them their flowers first. Because the Eagles, this was a hard-fought win. They've had a couple of those this year. But this was the first time where they really needed to be like, okay, we really need to play our absolute best game in order to win this. And they did that. Jalen Hurts, he played out of his mind. The offense looked really good. The defense was okay at times, but we'll talk about the Bills' offense later. But an unsung hero that I feel like is slowly becoming one of the most underrated players in football, Jake Elliott, their kicker, has just been incredible throughout his entire career. And he made one of the most clutch plays, forget just kicks, one of the most clutch plays I've ever seen, where the Bills drove down the field right before the 2-minute warning, scored a touchdown to put them up by 3, 31-28, and the Eagles drive down the field to put them close to field goal range for Jake Elliott, and twice in 3 plays, Jason Kelce gets called for false starts to push them from like 10 yards away from Elliott's field goal range. And it results in them going into a 3rd and 17. Pass by Hurts goes incomplete. And now it's a 4th and 17, setting up a 60-yard field goal attempt or near 60-yard field goal attempt. The official one was 59 yards. But it might as well have been 60 because it was in the pouring rain with about 25 seconds left to go. And, in the rain, terrible footing, a kick from that long out, that is a hard task to ask of anybody to do. And Jake Elliott goes up there and fucking drills it from 59 yards out in the pouring rain, and fucking drills it to tie the game and eventually sending it to overtime. And I sat there with my jaw on the floor, just in awe of what I had just seen from that. That is one of the best plays that will probably go untalked about and unnoticed for the rest of the year. But it really was that was one of the most clutch plays I have ever seen. And, Jake Elliott's been one of the best kickers in football since he's entered the league. And he showed it again in that moment as well. And then you get to overtime. Bills actually win the coin toss for once. That's been the bugaboo. Winning the coin toss to at least get a chance to go down the field and win the game, which they did. They had a chance to win this game. But Josh Allen has a miscommunication with Gabe Davis on a 3rd down at the worst possible time. They got close to the red zone. And, Josh Allen saw something in the coverage. He tried to throw it up. And Gabe Davis ran a corner route, and Josh Allen was expecting him to just go straight down the field, and it was a miscommunication, and the ball fell incomplete, and it sucked because Gabe Davis was wide-ass open, too. He was wide-ass open, and the ball was off the mark because they were just not on the same page, and they had to settle for 3, And I was like, they're going to regret that. There's a strong chance that they're going to regret that miscommunication. And sure enough, they did. Hurts led them down the field and eventually scored on a designed quarterback draw that would not have been possible. And this is another key element of a play that's not really going to be talked about by most people in the mainstream probably. But I noticed this the first time it happened was on the game-winning play. Jalen Hurts took the snap. It's a design QB draw. And he took the draw, ran in, and scored. Eagles win. But that play would not have been possible because they send a defender off the edge, the Bills do. And the second this ball is snapped, Jason Kelce, the center, completely making up for his 2 false starts that put that field goal into a 59-yard situation, makes up for it by making one of, if not the best blocks I've ever seen, where the second he snaps the ball, he pulls and immediately takes out the edge defender that was coming in on a blitz, and that opened up the lane for Jalen Hurts to run in for the game-winning touchdown. One of the best plays if you've not seen it, go back and watch it and watch Jason Kelce. Best play I've ever seen a center or an offensive lineman make. Ever. It was absolutely incredible. One of the best athletic feats I've ever seen an offensive lineman or a center make ever. It was absolutely incredible. And there's really nothing else to say about the Eagles. They're still as good as we think they are. But they're going to be tested. Because guess who's coming to town this weekend? The San Francisco 49ers, who are fresh off of beating the Seattle Seahawks quite handily on Thanksgiving. And the 49ers are coming into Philly as 3-point favorites. This is going to be a bloodbath. This is going to be a fun one to watch. This is most likely a NFC Championship game preview. It's definitely going to be a rematch of the NFC title game last year. Will it be a preview for this year's NFC title game? I don't know. We'll see. I'm super excited for that. And as far as the Buffalo Bills go, I was impressed with them. And I know they still lost this game, and that's heartbreaking. And it's another one of these incredible down-to-the-wire games that the Bills play in where they lose again. 2021, it was the playoff game against the Chiefs. Last year, it was against the Minnesota Vikings. And this year, it was against the Philadelphia Eagles. And, it's another one of those games where they weren't able to close out. But I still came out of this feeling much better about the Bills than I have recently. Because the offense looks a little rejuvenated. They still don't want to run the ball. But when Josh Allen is playing like that, it really doesn't matter, and it's the devil's advocate with the with the Buffalo Bills is, yeah, they don't really like to run the ball, but when you have Josh Allen who's running around like that and making incredible plays like that with his legs and his arms, it almost doesn't matter that you don't have a running game because he will single-handedly carry that team to greatness, and he played like a fucking animal in this game. And if he continues playing like that, the Bills can and should beat anybody. And there was a legitimate chance that they could have won this game. And like I said, they were a miscommunication away from winning this game. But man, I feel so much better about the Buffalo Bills coming out of this game, even though it was still a loss. But yeah, I mean, the defense is still spotty. Like I said, those key injuries, the key defensive players is going to hurt them for sure in the long term. But they will have some things to fix on the defensive side of the ball. But offensively, yeah, man, Josh Allen is just a one-man wrecking crew. And like I said, they can beat anybody if Josh Allen is playing like the Superman, because I know it's not, I've said in weeks past, it's not the best idea to just hope that he plays like Superman. But then you see games like this where he is Superman and you're like, yeah, I get why they would want him to do that because he's borderline unstoppable. When he's in the zone and he's in that Superman mode, he is borderline unstoppable. So, yeah, I still feel good about the Bills. I think they've reasserted themselves back into that conversation of yes, we can compete, but it is a matter of closing out these close games against great football teams. That has sort of been a bugaboo for this team for the last few years, and it's another, game that's gone into overtime where they just cannot close it out. But that's it for the Buffalo Bills, and that's it for Sunday. But the news cycle didn't end because remember earlier when I was talking about the Tank Bowl games that happened on Sunday, and I brought up specifically the Panthers and the Titans? Well, there was some news that dropped as a result of that game the following Monday. And that was, ladies and gentlemen, the Panthers have fired head coach Frank Reich. It is the second consecutive year Frank Reich has been fired mid-season. For those of you who remember, he was fired as the head coach of the Indianapolis Colts in the middle of last season, was famously replaced by Jeff Saturday. And here he is again, head coach for the Carolina Panthers, and gets fired mid-season after another embarrassing loss to a Tennessee Titans team that's just as bad. And now we know that his final play as possibly a head coach in the NFL, because I can't imagine he's going to get another head coaching job after this. No way in hell. But that would mean his final play as a head coach on offense was a shitty wide receiver screen pass on a 4th and 6 with less than 2 minutes to go, down one score. But yeah, just what a sad situation. Because, the Panthers, they were a team that I was convinced going into the season that in a bad NFC South that the Panthers were going to be the best team in that division. Yeah, I was dumb enough to say that the Panthers were probably going to be the best team in the NFC South heading into this year, and I couldn't have been more wrong. Because you looked at, all right, they made all the moves to go up and get their presumed guy of the future in Bryce Young. And then they hired this all-star coaching staff in Reich and Ajero Evero and, bringing in Josh McCown as the quarterback's coach. And it's just bringing all these guys that are like, yeah, this is going to be a well-coached team because they're bringing in so many good coaches. And here they are at 1-10 after week 12. And not only has Reich been fired, but they've also fired their offensive coordinator, and they fired McCown, their quarterback's coach. Chris Tabor, their special teams coordinator, has been promoted to the to be the interim head coach for the remainder of the season. And you look at this and you're like, man, what would have happened if they just kept Steve Wilkes as the head coach? Because you remember last year when they fired Matt Rule mid-season, Wilkes was promoted as the interim head coach, and he did a great job. He did a really good job with a Panthers team that everyone knew was tanking, and yet he willed that team. They played hard for him, and they won some games they probably had no business winning, and yet Tepper let him walk to bring in Frank Reich. And I liked the decision of hiring Frank Reich at first. I was shocked that they didn't keep Wilkes, but I was like, hey, Reich is the next best thing, because I thought he didn't get that well of a rap his last year or so in Indianapolis. So I was like, hey, this is a great opportunity with, a young, good quarterback and Bryce Young to really reestablish himself as a really good coach. And it just went the complete opposite way. And you look at the state of this Panthers team at the moment, and Bryce does not look good as a rookie. Hurts even more when you look at the guy taken after him, CJ Stroud, that he was in the MVP conversation for a bit and is playing like a legit top 10 quarterback in football as a rookie. And then you hear that McCown and Reich were huge Stroud guys and they wanted Stroud. And there was, the GM and Tepper apparently really wanted Bryce Young instead. So they went with Young. And it was just, you hear all that stuff. If you're a Panthers fan, it must make you sick to your stomach, because now you're sitting there of like, man, what if Reich and McCown got what they wanted and they drafted CJ Stroud first overall? What would have happened then? And you never know, because landing spot is everything for a quarterback. I don't know if CJ Stroud would be playing as well as he is right now if he went to Carolina as opposed to Houston. But I could definitely say that Bryce Young would be playing a hell of a lot better in Houston than he would be in Carolina. But yeah, this is just, everything is just horrible with this team right now. They have little to no talent on either side of the ball. Bryce Young, I hope his confidence isn't shot, because that would just be horrendous. And the team just doesn't have any direction because they don't have their first pick this year. Their first round pick is now belongs to the Chicago Bears, and they don't even have a second rounder for 2025 because that also belongs to Chicago. So they sold the farm to get Bryce Young, and now they're not really in a good spot to try and properly build around him because they don't have the draft capital to build around him. Like, can you imagine if they if they were able to hold on to their first round pick? I mean, granted, they probably wouldn't have gotten Bryce had they not given up their first round pick, but hypothetically, let's say they did. And they were this bad, but they still held the number 1 overall pick and got Marvin Harrison. Now all of a sudden you have some hope, and you're like, hey, we're stuck this year, but hey, and yes, we traded DJ Moore to help get this, but we're still going to get Marvin Harrison. But now that hope is gone because that pick belongs to Chicago. They're now in a perfect spot where the Bears are in a perfect spot where they can get both Caleb Williams, depending on how Justin Fields plays the rest of the way, and Marvin Harrison. And the Panthers get nothing. So they're just arguably in the worst spot of any franchise right now. And David Tepper, their owner, is doing them no favors. And I saw a tweet by Brett Coleman, and it's perfect. It makes so much sense. Where the best owners in not just the NFL, but in sports, the best owners are the ones that just open the book, write the paychecks, and sit the hell back and do nothing else. Let the football guys do the football guy things. The second the owners start mingling in the football operations of things, that's when things start to fall apart. And it's so consistent with teams where you have owners that are like that. And it's just, this is the third time now that he's had fired a coach mid-season. This is now his third interim head coach since he's bought the team. Let that sink in for a second. And it's his seventh, I think, if I'm not mistaken on the math, when he hires the next head coach in the offseason, whoever that might be. That will be the seventh head coach under the David Tepper-owned Carolina Panthers. 3 of them were interims. So this is just a team that's looking like the modern day Dan Snyder ran Washington Redskins. Like, when Washington was just run into the ground by Dan Snyder, and he was firing coach after coach and letting the wrong guys run football operations and getting himself involved in it, and it's turning into Dan Snyder 2.0 in a way, and I really hope it doesn't. I really hope David Tepper isn't Dan Snyder 2.0. It's hard to be Dan Snyder 2.0. You really have to be like scum of the earth to truly be Dan Snyder 2.0. But from a football standpoint, David Tepper, is trending in that direction. And I really hope, for the sake of Panthers fans, for the sake of the organization, for the sake of Bryce Young, I hope that's not the case. But sorry to end on such a depressing note, but that is that, and that is the show recapping Week 12, Thanksgiving weekend. Like I said, if you're not done so already, please like, subscribe, and share the video if you're not done so already. Also, go support me on Patreon at patreon.com/Double Diesel Sports. The link to that is in the description down below if you have not done so already and you would like to. But with that being said, I am Double Diesel. Peace.